The line in the marble. The story of Judge Naomi Ellison. It started like any other morning in Charleston. Warm lights spilling through Spanish moss, quiet breeze weaving past century-old buildings, and the familiar hum of city life easing into motion. Judge Naomi Ellison stepped out of her silver Buick in front of the Charleston Federal Courthouse, a navy blue blazer pressed perfectly against her shoulders, a slim leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Her silver locks, twisted neatly and pinned back, shimmered in the early sun like strands of history woven into her crown. She wasn't there to preside immediately. She liked to enter buildings not as Your Honor, but as Naomi, an observer of people, a student of systems. She believed presence mattered, especially in places where power was always assumed to wear a certain face. But on that morning, the system she had upheld, respected, and helped shape for over 2 decades would fail her in a way that would echo far beyond the marble halls of the courthouse. The main checkpoint. The shift in energy was instant. Deputy Marshal Carter Voss, thick-set, with a heavy jaw and even heavier attitude, stepped into her path before she could even place her bag on the conveyor. "Ma'am, step aside," he grunted, gesturing her away from the line. Naomi blinked, confused. "Is there a problem?" "No ID displayed. No visible credentials. You don't just walk in like that." She calmly retrieved her federal ID, flipping it open in front of him. He took it with 2 fingers, barely looked at it before slipping it into his pocket like it was a fast food receipt. Her jaw tightened. "I'd like that returned." "You in a rush, sweetheart?" The last word landed with such deliberate disrespect that even the younger officer standing by the scanner winced, but said nothing. "I need to reach courtroom 4B, Naomi stated evenly. "I have business inside. Then you'll follow our process." Voss grabbed her upper arm, guiding her, not roughly, but firmly, down a side hallway that bypassed the public flow of traffic. The hallway ended in a steel-gray room with no windows, no warmth, no purpose other than control. Inside, a steel chair, a scanner cart, and a set of electric clippers. Naomi took one look and said, "I don't consent to this. You have no probable cause. You're detaining me unlawfully." "That's cause enough," he growled, motioning to the chair. 2 additional deputies entered. She recognized neither. One restrained her wrist. The other stood behind the chair. Voss approached with the clippers. "What are you doing?" "Standard protocol," he smirked. "You could be hiding something in that mop." Before she could rise, a hand pushed her back down. The buzz ignited, and in seconds, the clippers were against her scalp. She felt the first lock fall, then another, and another. Her body remained still, her voice silenced, not from fear, but from calculation, from the knowledge that she was memorizing everything. One of them chuckled. "Looks better already." "You'll regret this," she said, voice like ice. Voss leaned down. "People like you always say that." And with that, they let her go. She collected her ID without a word, exited the room, and continued down the hall toward the courtroom. Her fingers shook slightly. Her scalp tingled where the locks had been ripped away. She passed staffers who pretended not to see. A few quickly looked away. Her power, temporarily stripped, left her naked to their silence. But they didn't know who she was. She opened the double courtroom doors to a hush. Every lawyer, every camera operator, every journalist turned to look. They had all seen her enter, assumed she was a defendant or a witness. But now they were watching her cross the floor, approach the judge's bench, and take her place behind it. She slipped into her robe in silence, her fingers moving with surgical grace. Her voice rang out with authority. "Court is now in session." The hearing was for a case involving the Charleston Police Department, multiple officers accused of assault during a peaceful demonstration. It had already drawn national attention. She began the session like any other, measured, direct. But her eyes never left Voss, who now stood rigid near the side door. Realizing too late that the woman he humiliated was the judge, she called a recess. Deputy Marshal Voss stepped forward. He hesitated. "Yes, Your Honor. State your name for the record." "Carter Voss." "How long have you served?" 17 years. And in those 17 years, how many women have you assaulted in that room? Silence. How many complaints have been filed against you? I. I don't. 12, she said. 12 documented complaints. All dismissed. All buried. Until now. The courtroom was frozen. You assaulted a federal judge today in her own courthouse, she said. You are hereby relieved of duty and remanded to federal custody for charges including unlawful detention, civil rights violations, and abuse of authority. Officers escort him out. No one spoke. No one dared that he was led away in cuffs. Just like that, the storm had begun. What followed over the next 2 days was a reckoning. Former staff came forward, one by one. First an intern who had seen what happened but hadn't spoken. Then a woman named Valerie Rivers, a former clerk who had quietly tracked internal complaints for years. She testified that dozens of grievances had been buried by supervisors for the sake of appearances. Judge Terrence Mahoney, Naomi's own mentor, had signed off on more than half of them. When presented with internal memos revealing he had knowingly enabled Voss's abuse to keep the courthouse running smoothly, Naomi's face didn't twitch, but her eyes blazed. We will no longer protect predators in the name of order, she declared from the bench. That ends now. Protesters gathered outside. Journalists from CNN, MSNBC, and even BBC filled the back rows. A new term began to surface on signs and hashtags. The Ellison Standard, a new expectation of justice, born from a moment of public assault and private resilience. Then came the DOJ. A representative entered her chambers with a sealed envelope. The courthouse was now under federal review. The footage had gone viral. I didn't do this for the internet, Naomi said. That's why it matters, the agent replied. Testimony after testimony cracked the walls further. A retired U.S. Marshal admitted he had once filed a complaint that disappeared. A local reverend brought forward a list of over 30 citizens, many black and brown, who had been harassed or harmed in that same courthouse. She called them into open court one by one. They stood. I was shoved for asking where my son's hearing was. I was told to watch my tone when asking for directions. I was strip-searched because I fit a profile. Each story stitched a pattern. And each time, Naomi didn't flinch. This is no longer just a courtroom, she said. It's a forum of truth. Then came the final day. The courtroom was overflowing. Law students filled the front row. Senators sent aides. The president had requested a briefing. Naomi stood at the bench, laid down her robe, and said, "We are not here to perform justice. We are here to demand it." She unveiled the Ellison Standard, a policy proposal mandating mandatory anti-bias training, quarterly psychological evaluations, independent review of all security personnel, a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory conduct. I will take this to the circuit, to the Senate, to the people, she said, because I refuse to let what happened to me happen to anyone else. The courtroom rose, not for ceremony, but for solidarity. Voss was sentenced later that day. 6 years for abuse of authority. 5 more for civil rights violations. 1 additional for obstruction, but he stood pale and trembling. Naomi faced him directly. You thought silence would protect you. That power made you untouchable. But today, you learn what it means to be held accountable. And then she said the words that would be etched into courthouse plaques for years to come. Justice begins not with the law, but with those who refuse to be silent. She adjourned court and walked out into the light, no wig, no hat, just a shaved head and the strength of someone who had been through fire and walked out steel. Outside, people stood in quiet reverence. Some touched her arm. Others simply nodded. Weeks passed. Her policy was adopted statewide. Then in Washington, a bill was drafted in Congress. Months later, Judge Naomi Ellison was awarded the Presidential Medal of Justice. She stood at the podium and said, I was never meant to be here. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because this system was never built with women like me in mind. And yet, I am here, not as a symbol, but as proof that justice is possible, even when the system says otherwise. And far away, in a federal prison, Carter Voss watched the broadcast alone, silent. For the first time in his life, he understood. Silence couldn't save him anymore. But truth? Truth was the thing that would never be silenced again.